We are live. Welcome everyone to the Dead of God live stream. We are live here with Daniel Marsh-Patrick, the author, the creator, the one and only Dead of God of Deneb. Welcome, Daniel. How the heck are you doing, man?
Oh wow, what an intro. I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I'm so good. Lovely to
awesome.
be here. Thank you.
Oh, so excited to have you. So I really want to get into Deneb as a custom visual that is enterprise ready and it's available to be able to be distributed and used inside of enterprise. But before we do all of that, let's first introduce yourself. Provide people who may not be on the stream, who may not be familiar with you, like a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, so I am based in New Zealand, down on the South Island, and I'm originally from the UK. So I've been in New Zealand for probably about 15 years, but originally, born and bred in the UK and sort of started my career there, but made a move, I was probably about 27 or so when I did that. So I've been living over in New Zealand and working in IT and data and business intelligence probably for the last 12 years out of my 20-year career, but it's been absolutely fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome. And I see we've got Carrie on the line. Aussie. That's welcome.
Good to see you, Carrie.
And we've got Sentido from Venezuela.
That'll be,
Am I saying that? I think I might be.
I should know his name. It's Jose Escalante.
Oh, is that who that is?
He's done.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's done some work with Deneb as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, okay, so you've been working in data and BI and stuff for 20 years or so. And you're a Microsoft MVP, right?
I am. Yep.
Awesome.
I think I've just got my third year. So
yeah, we got it the same year. We're bros there.
Months ahead of me.
Yeah. But you got started building out something called Deneb, which is a custom visualization tool. But let's take a step back and what was it that you were seeing inside of Power BI that made you go, hang on, I need something more?
It sort of started, I mean, I was a fairly early adopter of Power BI, so I got into it tail end of 2013, back when it was Power BI for Office 365. So it was all inside Excel, and it was I think it was 3 components. You had Power View, Power Pivot, and what's the other Power? Power Query, of course. Yeah. Shouldn't forget Power Query. And I got introduced to it, and I just really wanted to use it. And I was happy enough in my career at that point that the visuals were kind of, you couldn't do a lot with them at that point. But they were good enough, and we started to build some really cool stuff with it and made some inroads in our company.
I think Power View was amazing. I absolutely loved it. Something in Excel that was transformative, right?
It was, yeah. It was amazing, and we had a lot of issues in our company with the compatibility of it because it was all in Silverlight, and you deployed it to SharePoint, and that's all gone, fortunately. Because when it went GA in 2015, we got a significant shift into the architecture that we see today. So for those of us that kind of came from that area, visuals were a huge step up. And for me, I was more of a back-end kind of person. I was more into modeling and ETL, but I kind of fell into the need to do more with the canvas and really kind of beef up the experience. So for a long time, Power BI kept me happy. But it was probably a couple of years in, so I'm thinking about 2017 now. One of the features from Power View, because we talked about that, was that you had the ability to tile visuals. And that's so you could put it into the field, and the visuals would kind of project out by that. So you could have lots of mini charts, and that's a technique known as small multiples.
Yeah.
And I remember when we got new Power BI, we sort of had a little bit of a gap in feature parity. So some stuff didn't make it across, and there was a big list of things that was going to make it. And we were like, oh, when's tiling coming? When's tiling coming? And it kind of never came. So I got to sort of 2017. And I was kind of doing all these hokey workarounds for it. And I kind of got to the point where I'm like, this isn't going to happen. And I have so many use cases where I need these small multiples because I want to be able to do this for people because it just makes sense. And custom visuals came out quite quickly as a concept, I think in 2016. And they kind of passed me by, and there was something that I just saw that other people did. Other people made them. I don't have to care about it. So I would use custom visuals quite a lot, but couldn't find what I wanted. So I kind of had to sit down basically hate learn how to do it. That's the tall and short of it. But I had to, I had a little bit of experience of web development, so I thought, and some of the tooling that sits behind it. So D3, which is a JavaScript library that a lot of people use for building charts, and I just thought, well, I can make this work. And after a lot of hacking, I got something that worked. And then a bit more hacking, it worked a bit better, and I just sort of thought, well, I could probably learn how to put this on the marketplace, app source, which is where you get visuals. So then the next learning was how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it out, and I got some really positive responses about it. So I then thought, well, I can keep developing this, and got that working, and started to develop a few more visuals. And it's just more about, we run into some limitations with the canvas, and I understand how Power BI, one of the things you get from building visuals is you sort of learn about how visuals kind of work under the hood. I can't speak for core visuals, but how Power BI kind of does its thing. And you do understand some of the limitations, but at the same time, you want to work around them and help people out. And that's ultimately what drives it.
Sure. So you said something interesting I'd like to go a little bit deeper into. Your first custom visual, you said, okay, hey, I can do this. I think I can get into this, and I can create this, and it can be like a useful thing. How long did it take you to go from I'm going to create a custom visual to I have a functioning custom visual in place?
It depends where you draw the line, but let's just sort of say if I had a prototype that worked, probably about 30 or 40 hours. But the reality sets in when you start to think about how to make it resizable and how to add properties and how to deal with all the different kinds of data sets you can have. And then you're adding probably 150 hours on top of that, because you've got to really tighten it up. And that's one of the big differences. Is it's very easy to build something conceptually, but then making it resilient and suitable for so many people, and there's use cases you don't even understand. So a big part of learning is, once it's up, how do you make it, how do you improve the quality? And that's where most of the time goes.
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? Because while I have not created a custom visual, I have been on teams and on projects where we took on, as part of that work, building a custom visual, getting it out, making it available inside of the service, and then trying to have people leverage it. And it was a significant time sink. You're talking 200 man hours of development. Well, okay, if you work 40-hour weeks just on that means 5 weeks. Most of your developers in engineering, you're not 100% developed or dedicated to just that one feature. So then you're talking a custom visual ends up taking 2, 3, 4 months at times to be able to get it up and working and have it really be snappy, right? And that. Yeah. In many organizations, if you attempted this in the past, that is a very high bar that it can be really hard to recoup that investment, right?
It is. It's essentially a software development project, even though it's a small asset in the bigger piece of your ecosystem. They're full on, they're web development projects. You have to build the software inside this little container that does everything you want, and the refinement of that is such a big piece. So, generally, if you're looking at a single use case within an org, you'll probably be looking to just make it work.
Yeah.
Right. If you're looking at it from an investment perspective, and that's where the challenges are. One of the things that came out of me publishing visuals to the marketplace was people would ask me to help build visuals for them.
Yeah.
And that is honestly, when you tell them how much it is or how much it could potentially be, then they just run away, or you don't hear from them again.
Right.
So it's great to be that point of contact, but it's challenging to make it viable from a cost perspective.
So and that actually plays into a really good example that we actually have. I was working on a project that I needed a custom visual on, and I had a deadline, and I looked at it. I spent a little time watching some visuals or some videos online, and I'm going to share some resources to people. So if you're saying, hey, Chris, where the heck do I go to, get more information on this? Well, we've got a whole bunch of resources I'm going to share with you first. So to lead off, I want to make sure we call out the new Stars of Data. They've got a conference that's kicking off. When is that?
It's the end of this week.
The end of this week. Yeah. And There is a great presentation, I understand, on creating your own Deneb visual.
Yeah, so there's a New Stars of Data is an event for people that have never presented before, to do their first presentation. They get mentored by someone else in the community, and Blanca, I believe, is she's presenting her first session on Deneb as an introduction. So we may not get to do that sort of thing today, but if you need an intro, it's a free event you can attend, and you'll get a lot out of it.
Yeah, yeah. So this conversation is going to be like at the enterprise level. But if you want to get started, that's exactly what we wanted to share that. Carrie asked, do you still have a training course on custom visual development?
Oh, yes, I do actually. I'll have to forward that link on to you a little bit later because I don't have it handy. But if
Okay.
you folks know Radicad, which I'm sure you do if you work in Power BI, Reza and Layla, fantastic pair of MVPs who are based in New Zealand as well. So Radicad, they have a training course on custom visual development, which I built probably a couple of years ago. So it's getting a little old, but it still works.
Oh,
And
that's
if you want to know
fantastic.
more about going back to the bare metal, that's a good intro. We build a fully functioning visual, and we do build all the stuff we talk about being hard. So making it responsive and adding properties and trying to share some things from the trenches that aren't in some of the documentation. Things I learned, how to think about certifying your visuals, that kind of thing. So yes, I do. Thank you for asking, Kerry. I totally forgot about that.
Well, and we also know that our friends over at Enterprise DNA, they've got a course out there as well, right? On getting started in Deneb?
Yes, they've done a course on Deneb. So Greg Phillips, who's one of their content creators, he got very, very into Deneb very, very early. So we put Deneb into public preview March or April 2021. So that was the case of I've been working on this thing for a couple of years as an idea, and I'm sort of ready to let some people play with it.
Yeah.
So Greg latched on very quickly and got very excited about it, and Enterprise DNA mirrored his enthusiasm, and Greg put this course together. So when Deneb went live in November, we had a few months, and then early this year the course came out. So there is a course for people that want a bit more of a guided intro to it, which is great. And I think he's done a fantastic job. And Greg produces many templates and puts them on the Enterprise DNA forum. So if you're a member there, the course is in your membership, and the templates are available as well if you're a forum participant as well. So he does a couple a month and puts a lot of work out. So it's really good.
Yeah, yeah, and the community around this is really getting quite big. I'm going to share now your like official resource link, so we're going to kind of back into that.
Cool.
To get that out there. But you've got all sorts of like highlight all of the links that people are creating in Deneb, right? You've got all of that stuff linked out on the site, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the key thing about Deneb is it's a free and open source tool that I'm building to help the community. It's built on a fantastic set of languages, which we'll hopefully talk about in a little bit. But, people like Kerry, who's on the chat, Jose, who's on the chat, they have done a lot of, they were early adopters. They're quite excited about what the tooling can do. They've produced their own articles and walkthroughs. And there's a lot of other people around. Tace, Shad, who are on the page, Ben Ferry, the Power BI guy.
Yeah.
And loads of people that I'm still trying to collect. But basically anything I see, I'm trying to put on that page with their permission to share and drive people to those learnings as well. Because it's only successful as the community make it, because I'm busy developing it, and as excited as I am about it, I just don't have time to do all the videos and everything else as well, as much as I'd love to.
Well, actually, that's a good point, Daniel. I presume you have a day job. Do you not work? It's like with all the stuff that's coming out with Deneb, and I know the effort that it goes into building this out. Like or have you just have you abandoned sleep? How do you do this?
It's a multitude of things. So
yeah.
I work with a company in Australia called Discovery AI, who are an environmental analytics company. So Alice Drummond and Christine Barbach, who are featured on your site, lovely people to work for. I do a lot of work with them, helping to put together Power BI solutions, and also a lot of stuff with SQL and Azure Data Factory, because that's my heart's there as well. So I get to run the gamut of the BI spectrum, plus do a little bit of visualization work. We have projects as well where we build custom visuals. I'm busy with them a couple of days a week, so they're very understanding and accommodating me, and that frees me up to spend the rest of my work week kind of doing freelance consulting and actually having time to develop Deneb, because I probably put about 30 hours a week into developing the visual. So even though it's out and it's working, I'm not happy with it, and I keep refining it. So there's a lot of work to do for me to get it where I think it needs to be, and then I'm getting feedback from the community, and they're giving me feature requests, and that's exciting because people want these things. So I'm happy to work on them as long as time allows. And I have a very understanding wife who is able to support me as well. So we support each other, and yeah,
well, a big shout out to all wives everywhere who have to bear the burden of our passions, huh?
So she's great, and she supports me to free up some of my week to do this work for the community, which I'm really happy about.
Oh, that's fantastic. And actually that does bring us back full circle. Is I was on a project where we had a very specific custom visual requirements where we needed a visual to work and function in a certain way. We had a designer who had a great idea for how she wanted it to look and feel and interact. And classically, I looked at it like development wise. I said, the old side, that's 3 months of work. We just couldn't afford it. It was just not going to happen. I spent some time with the videos, and I thought, maybe I could do this, but I realized I didn't necessarily have time either. And so that's when I reached out to you, and we began to talk about like how we could coordinate. And I think we went from like, hey, could you do this, to here's a visual, does this work for you? And like, I mean, we should really be talking hours, not days, when it comes to like the delivery on it. It was amazing, right?
Yeah, I think from start to end, because I think for me it was a Monday morning, so I came in and I had a message from you, and I think within about 4 hours you'd sent me the concept, and I sent you back a version that I thought matched, and that I don't think it needed much more refinement from there. So I think, normally for me, a lot of potential business comes my way to build a custom visual, and it's a hard discussion to have because it's not that easy. Because if you want to build a custom visual from scratch, you've got to do all the requirements analysis, and you've got to talk about what you need, and people don't always necessarily know how things should work. So there's a very long lead time to even get a quote to somebody. And then we give them the quote, and then they don't like the quote because it's expensive. And it just is, because there's a lot of work. But with, one of the reasons I wanted to put Deneb together was because there's just some amazing languages, Vega and Vega Lite, that are developed by some leaders in our field. And that does a lot of what most people need a custom visual for. Often I get people approach me because they don't want something completely new. They have a frustration with a particular visual, and they just want to tweak a small part of it. But what we have to think about is I still have to build the visual before we can tweak that bit. It's not like a case of I can just grab the code for the bar chart from Microsoft and tweak a bit of it. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. So there's a lot of effort to put that together, and that's something that somebody doesn't want to pay for, and I understand that. But at the same time, I have to go through all that to make it work, and everyone's a little different, so it's always hard to kind of rubber stamp the code we've built, and that's often what puts people off. But with a visual like Deneb, we're building it on a really solid visual language, or two visual languages. We have the choice of one or the other, and a lot of that stuff is taken care of, so you can just focus on the iteration. Does this look right? If it doesn't, what can we change? Rather than let's get something in front of you, and it's going to take a week or 2 weeks before you even see that. And I can build a visual in 10th or a 20th of the time and cost than I could a custom visual. And at the same time, I can support somebody remotely much more easily. So if somebody's stuck, I can have a 1 hour call or something and just get them unstuck, and that seems to work quite well for a lot of my clients.
Well, and I am going to say that it is now with Deneb, the bar to make a visual and to make adjustments to it is low enough and easy enough to get started that, like, our engagement was 4 hours. You knew what you're doing, right? I would say if you're going to get started working in it, it's good. Obviously, it's good. You've written it. You're the master of it. So someone getting started, it's going to take you longer, right? But once you get in and you start to work, it becomes really easy to iterate, to make changes. I mean, me and you went back and forth for like 4 hours or whatever it was. I then had to make a handful of additional changes, and it was so easy. Like, I'm like, I don't even have to ask Daniel on this. Like, I have these changes, right? And
Yeah.
in companies, the supportability of code to be able to keep that going and keep things up and running is a big deal, right? Like, it's great to have Daniel there, but not always are you available 24/7 for like every little thing on the planet, of course. So be able to say, hey, we want to make this small adjustment, or can we break these things up in a different way to other developers, and have them be able to do that successfully is a big deal. So I honestly super impressed by that side of it too.
Yeah, and that's really, it was really just born out of, at least for me, necessity. It was a case of, I want to develop more visuals, but I also want to reduce the time. So for me, it started as a thing for me to help reduce my complexity in these sort of engagements. But with Discovery AI, we get asked for a lot of specific visual work, and again, it's expensive for us to develop them. So how do we cut that down? And I sort of just ran with this idea in my spare time, and I remember demoing it as a concept back at a meetup in December 2020, and I think Kerry Glasgow and I were at the same meetup, and she sort of galvanized me to finish it, because she said, that looks so cool, I want it. How do I start using it?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I guess I've got to develop it. So I carried on. It was just an idea I was playing with, and it's kind of gone from there. But it does really reduce the overhead, and you have to think a bit differently about a visual. It's not a case of choosing one you already know from a palette. You have to, it's almost like going back to school and cracking out the graph paper. How do I draw a bar chart, or how do I draw a line chart? And you've got to think that way, but it's quite a good mental model to have, because you start thinking differently about visuals, and it becomes very easy to then, for subsequent projects, once you get the hang of the language and the hang of the concept, to sort of go, oh yeah, it's this, and this, done. And I've started to incorporate that mind pattern into my blog posts. I don't do many blog posts, but if I do, I try to sort of break out. And it was a technique that Jose, who's on the stream, used for presenting the concept of layers within Deneb. How do I make complex charts? Well, I just break them down into layers, and then I stack them all up again. Yeah. So I did borrow that concept very heavily, but it's a great way of teaching.
No, and that's really true. The nice thing I found about it was it had me thinking about all the various elements in a different way. And honestly, if the link I shared with the resources, like, I was able to get in and fix and make changes to it without any real issues. So a real fantastic model and ability to engage and work with. I'm just going to put in a plug, because I watched the Power BI tips, as well as Power BI Guys demo that was out there. I have not watched Reed's or what was Santito's Phillips?
Yeah, Jose's. They're all mostly Spanish language, but they're so good. They're fantastic examples.
Okay.
And because it's visuals, you can follow along quite easily.
Yeah.
So you can see the amazing work he's putting together. It's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, no, there are some really great videos out there for people that, I don't want to be all like, oh, you don't know how easy it is. Well, I didn't have this stuff. But that's the point. We're supposed to make it easier for those who follow us. And I'm really, really grateful that there are people that have adopted the tooling and are prepared to help. That's one of the most awesome things about the community that we're in. And the Vega team, the Vega and Vega Lite developers, this thing started out in the University of Washington Interactive Data Lab as a concept, and it's grown into fully featured languages. And they're used all over the place. They're absolutely amazing, and nothing would be possible without those. And that's really what it's about. And those, like you've said about going to the websites, the documentation is amazing. So this team just haven't built an amazing language. They've built an amazing ecosystem and support around it, so people that are new to it can go to the documentation and see examples and understand what it's about.
Yeah, and
that's essential.
Yeah, that's a excellent point. So we're talking about, it wasn't just something like you threw together in your back room or shed on a weekend, right? Like, there's more to it than just you, right? Like, you're taking some open source project that came out of the University of Washington, right? you're incorporating that in and making that available to see into a community of like-minded nerds who just absolutely love all this stuff and are just looking to help each other do more, better in the data space, right?
Yep, that's right. And you know, I am but one person, so my challenge is that I've got to think, how can I, if I want to make this work, how can I help? So there's already languages out there, so why reinvent the wheel?
Yep.
They're not proprietary to Microsoft, so you can get your learning various other places.
Yep.
Really well documented. So then it's a case of like, well, okay, how do I make this work inside Power BI, and how do I integrate it with Power BI?
Yep.
And that has been the you start with the 20-hour prototype, and then this one it's getting into the thousands of hours, because custom visuals as a concept are so well locked down by Microsoft, even the uncertified ones. You have to think very creatively about how to make things work, and that's honestly where most of it comes from. It's to make it, you know, I know languages aren't for everybody, but how can we streamline the interactivity and those kind of things so that they're not as daunting for people? And that's where most of my time goes. And then there's the productivity improvements and dealing with things not being able to work inside custom visuals for technical reasons. And you know, and like I say, it's a continuing journey, and it's not finished yet. It's a long way from being finished.
Right.
So the version that's out now, it's great, and I'm really happy that people are using it. And one of the challenges was to get something like that certified. That was hard in itself, because nothing like that had really come along before Deneb. Charticulator is the Microsoft visual that wasn't certified until this year.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to get Deneb certified in October last year, and I honestly thought it would be a challenge, but Microsoft were really supportive about getting it through. And now, as a result of that, that's another challenge we get from people coming to us. I need you to develop a visual, and I need it to be certified. And then one of the requirements of certification is it has to be an app source. So are you prepared to release your visual to app source? Oh, no. Well, I'm sorry, can't certify it.
Right.
So one of the fundamental pillars of Deneb was not only to have a visual and a good language and an ecosystem and a UI, but everything that works in there needs to work as if it's certified.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of my clients and a lot of people want certified visuals, and there's a lot of work to make that happen. So that's where all the time goes.
Well, and you know, that's exactly right. So we've covered all of the like big architectural and political hurdles that we might have when it comes to how do you build, manage, create this inside your system. It needs to be certified. It needs to be supportable. We need to be able to have it so that, you know, our developers can run and manage and work with it. And that's where I think, Deneb really shines, right? So it's possible to build a visual, create a template from it, and then be able to store that, share that, so you can have an enterprise visual that is your bread and butter that you use potentially all over the place. And you can manage that inside of a Git repo and distribute that out to people inside your organization relatively easily, right? Right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And there are people in the community, as I say, that are sharing their templates on their websites, and some of those are Git repositories. Mike Collar from Power BI Tips, he's got his own repository, which is linked on that page you gave, and he's working with the community to harvest up templates for people to find. But yeah, I think it's one of the most useful parts of it is not only can I do my work inside a visual, but I can get that work out. I can put it somewhere so it's safe and version controlled, and I can perhaps iteratively develop it and put it back there. And when I need it, I can pull it out and I can load it in. And it would be really, really lovely if, we don't have the same, when I think about tools like Tabular Editor that are able to kind of just talk directly to the Power BI data model, we don't quite have that with visuals.
Right.
And that would really complete the circle. If we could automate the creation of visuals programmatically, it could be even more beautiful, really. We could have a continuous delivery type approach where we've got templates squared away and we push them in, and there's the potential is there, and I hope that's something that we see one day.
So are we going to see an AI art, like how they do AI artwork? We're going to see AI analytics visuals that get generated, and although I don't know how you train that model, and not just have everything churn out pie chart after pie chart, right? Like. Like, this AI is the
sometimes pie
worst. All it
charts are
does is
okay.
pie charts.
But that's what we need. No, it's sometimes they work, not always, but sometimes they work. But yeah, I think it'd be fun. It'd be a fun concept trying to think about, well, I guess with all the templates coming out, maybe you could train it.
Yeah.
You could start passing templates through such a tool and start training it into, to think visually. Could be a good idea out there, actually.
If we could only get access to Microsoft's like user logs, figure out what visuals are being actively hit and productively used, then there goes the AI, right?
There's probably some gold in them thar hills, that's for sure. But I think that's one of the challenges we have with custom visuals, particularly again because they're internal to Power BI desktop. We can't, particularly certified ones, we can't have any telemetry or anything like that. So it's for me the only real mark of success I have is, or is it working, is seeing what people are posting.
Yeah.
And people reaching out to me and letting me know how they're getting on, or it's encouraging to see. I kind of built this thing for me, and there are people that are able to find a use for it and are able to get miles more out of it than I could. And that's the other thing. As a developer, you're constrained to my thinking, right? So if I build a visual, the functionality, the properties, the behavior is all about how I think you should use it. Whereas with a tool like Deneb, it's more about what you want it to do. And people like Carrie have already shown me that she has a fantastic flair for artistry, and she really understands. Her creativity is just incredible. And Carrie, whilst she probably could learn how to do web development, her inclination to do it probably isn't there, and that's a huge missed opportunity. So the best thing is seeing what people are teaching me as well. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm always impressed with what we learn from our community, and
Absolutely.
people like Carrie and others that are out there. It is just a wonderful thing. We have a question from Greg. Greg wants to know if you have a high level view of what's your take on commercial off the shelf versus open source when it comes to software.
Oh wow. I'm a very on the fence kind of guy with everything, because I analyze things way too much, right? So people ask me questions, I'm usually kind of thinking about the benefits and the drawbacks. And I think there are benefits and drawbacks to each. I think with your off the shelf commercial stuff, you usually have a company that goes with it that will support it and develop it and maintain it, and there's usually some guarantee there. With open source, it's all about the community and enthusiasm, and at the minute, it's really just me building on top of languages that are very well established and are still maintained. Vega and Vega Lite are still being maintained, which is great. And there are benefits and drawbacks to each. I guess one of the key things with open source is you can see exactly how the sausage is made. But there are, for some enterprises, there are some difficulties around probably support, or is this thing going to go away? But you can get that with some commercial packages as well. It's a difficult sort of time to guarantee certainty. But my view is that if it works for you, then use it or don't. I mean, if it's commercial, it has a cost and it does what you want and it does it faster, why not? I mean, I would definitely recommend, there's plenty of great custom visuals that are commercial, really well supported, absolutely fantastic. And yes, you probably could get a tool like Deneb and replicate them a little bit, but I would say it's all about, productivity at that point. So, if you get your support and your licensing costs you way less than the man hours or person hours to build it, why wouldn't you do that? So for me, it's about the right tool for the right job. I don't know if that really answers the question, but I'm not a particularly controversial person. But yeah, I'm happy to pay for something if it makes my life easier. But at the same time, I'm also happy to put it, roll up my sleeves and work stuff out. So I'm perhaps not the advocate for either.
I like that. The right tool for the right job. That is.
But I'm a fan of both.
Yeah,
that's the short answer.
Yep. Well, and but I agree. I think that makes sense too, right? Like I am down with some Power BI, but if you're talking with someone who's working 100% inside of like Google, or you're all inside of Salesforce, I don't know how you would not use Click or Tableau in those situations, right? Like. You just have you have to evaluate your environment and use the right tool for the right solution. So I agree 100%.
Yeah, and there are some people that make the hybrid approach work, and even some of those big companies like Facebook built React, which is an amazing JavaScript library. And yes, there are alternatives to that now as well. But you know, there's so many ways you can cut and dry things. So yeah, it's a big old question.
Yes, yes. That keyboard is, I don't know what that means, Carrie, but okay.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
I just saw that question. I'm curious as to where the keyboard is.
Yeah, like what keyboard are we seeing here all of a sudden? uh Like suddenly I bought one of those new OBS cameras that like tracks you and like moves you around and stuff. Like it's an AI. I don't have it hooked up. I don't think I have it hooked up anyplace, but suddenly I'm worried like I'm streaming some weird camera someplace. Awesome. Well, okay, so we've been talking for quite a bit about the functionality, the reason why you would want to have a custom visual. The reason, Power BI visuals don't do what you need. The reason why Deneb is great is because it is something that you can do with a very low cost and have, it's a solid supportable platform, and that we can start to check that in and manage that inside your enterprise so that you can have that standardization, you can have that supportability, you can have that management without having to like be super deep into it. Daniel, we kind of talked. You had like a little example that you could show us on how someone in a company could organize and manage a visual, not build a visual. That's a completely different training, right?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, as much as I would love to, I could stay on and talk because I can talk the hind legs of this thing, but not everyone has that amount of free time. So no, what we sort of thought was I would probably suggest if you're new to Deneb, maybe check out the new Stars of Data session at the end of the week, or have a look at some of the videos that do the intros. They will do a better job than I can. Some of them are me, but make of that what you will. But what we want to, we don't often get to talk about the templating, and it's not overly complex, but it's something that is handy. So what I thought we'd do today is we'd start with, we'll start at the end. So normally when I do an intro, I kind of finish up with a visual that does some of the bells and whistles, and it's then more about what we might do with it. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen, and hopefully that's going to come across.
We're looking good.
Lovely. So here's a little bit of New Zealand geography for you. So we've got a whole bunch of cities here. We've got Auckland currently highlighted, but we've built a really simple heat map using Deneb. So this takes if we look at we'll try zoom it. We're passing in a column called year, month, and average temperature. So temperature is a measure. Year, month is actually a date column, which is the first of each month by year, and it goes. You can see here, Auckland starts in the 60s. And we can go, I think some of the earlier ones go back even further. We've got some in the 1950s and so on, but we can see that this is responding how we would expect. We've got a slicer, we can see the visual updating, but we're just passing in two fields, a column for month and a column for year, and a measure. We're processing the date and turning it into this XY heat map. It's a very simple use case, but it illustrates some of the functionality quite well. So the other thing we can do with Deneb that we can't do with, say, R and Python visuals is we saw the tooltip very briefly. So we can bind interactivity to the main window. And this is some of the stuff we talked about earlier where, knitting these tools together is where a lot of the work goes. So you don't have to worry about it. We can click on a data point and it will cross-filter the other visuals. We can control click. And, we can see that bar chart in the bottom right is responding. And if we were to go to the bar chart, we could click on, say, July, and we've set up the Deneb visual for cross-highlighting. So I think these things all have considerations. We don't get this for free, but we make it much easier. So the website and some of the videos you'll see will detail how to go through that. But Deneb itself, in the report view, looks like a visual should, but what we have is the ability to edit that visual in an advanced mode. So if we click on the visual header, we can click the edit button, which only appears for certain visuals that flag it as being available. And we can actually create a whole user interface inside this full screen. So this is focus mode, which is what happens when you maximize a visual, but this is a special state that we can assign to say we're in what's called the advanced editor. So tools like Charticulator use it, the infographic designer uses it. There are a few visuals, but not many. but it does give us the ability to say, well, here's our visual as it looks on the canvas. And then here on the left this is Vega Light. So this is some JSON. So it's plain text, and it's very what we call declarative language. So what we're doing is we're not focusing on how the visuals should work from a low-level code perspective. We're using high-level data structure, JSON, to describe how it should work. So we won't spend too much time on it, but just very quickly, this mark, is the text a good size, Chris, or shall I just maximize it, make it a bit bigger? I'll make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, make it a little bigger might be good.
So we'll just increase the font size a bit. Hopefully that should make a bit of a difference. So we can see we have this concept here called a mark, and that's got a rectangle, and it's got a tooltip flag on it. So that's basically representing each one of our data points. So it's a rectangle, and it fires a tooltip. And we could just as easily set that to false and save our changes, and we do. Look at that. Brilliant. Okay, well, that's a good light demo. There are settings for that. I shouldn't have tried that. Anyway, we're binding these marks, and we're creating a rectangle with a tooltip. What I would actually do is I would go to the settings and turn that tooltip off. That's the right way to do it. I was trying to be smart, and it goes to show you should never be smart. Just follow the rules.
Go back though. This is good for enterprise like admins or people who are trying to manage a large team. Look how easy this is to interact with it, and this is got a beautiful interface, super easy to work with when it comes to configuring it. But when it comes to coding it, you're just JSON. That's all you're managing, right?
That's right. Yeah. So we have what we call encoding channels, and these map properties like the X coordinate. That's the year component of our date column, and the Y axis is the month component of our date column. So then those rectangles get projected out. So that sort of gives us the ability to start binding attributes to these things. And then our color is based on our average temperature, so that produces this nice gradient. And these are really nice little features of the language. In the tooltip, we've passed in some fields if the report page tooltip didn't show. So we could turn that off, but I won't worry about that for now. And then the opacity is where we've built the interactivity in. So when we click on a data point, it dims the ones that aren't selected according to the window. So
okay.
It's how you build these up. So once you've got your design, this is a simple design, but once we've got it, we might be ready to move it somewhere else. So we've got the option to generate a JSON template here. So we can click on that button within the editor, and then we get this dialog come up that says, okay, what do we need to know about the template? So I can start typing some information, and I could just call that, heat map, temperature. I type and talk at the same time. It's never going to end well. And I can give it a quick description if I want, and I can just put my name in if I want to do that as well. We don't have to. I've also got the option to include a preview image. So what I can do with my template is I can store and what it's done is it's done a really bad thing here because I've got it
clicked,
highlighted.
Yeah.
So it's not looking very great. So I'll just jump out of that and I'll clear the highlight, and I'll do it again. But I can see my fields are retained, which is good. I'll just click that, and that looks a bit more like a heat map. So what that does is that takes the current visual view and it generates a little image of it. And I generally recommend that's off unless you want to keep it, because you may have data in there that you may not want to share in the visual,
right.
the picture. What we then do is we look at the columns in the bucket here, and we create placeholders for them. So we've got the list of fields that are in the values bucket over here. And what we can do is, I'll just zoom in. We can see we've got year, month, and underneath it says column, year, month, and then average temperature says underneath measure, average temperature. So what we want to do is, these are the original kind of things that relate to our values. But what we might want to do is actually just call that date. If we're thinking about making this like a generic template,
yep.
We don't want to expose the name of our column possibly, or our measure, because they might reveal information about our internal data. So instead, why don't we make it more generic? So we could just call that measure. If we wanted to just call them something generic, date and measure, done. And I could put a description in there, date used to group measure. If I want to put it in, I don't have to put a description in. So I'll leave the measure blank. And when that's done, I can just click on the generator template button, And what I do here is I get my preview of my generated JSON. So what happens is there's a bunch of extra stuff that gets put up here that includes the information we've typed in. The image gets generated as a piece of it's encoded in what we call base64. So this will be plain text. So if we don't include that, the template's a bit smaller. Underneath that, we've got information about our data set. And you can see that it's created two placeholders, and its name is date. It's not got the year month name in there at all. So we haven't shared that information. And the same with the one underneath, the measure. It's actually not using year, month, and average temperature. It's using the values we've typed in. And then underneath is all the other stuff we put in our editor. But what's key is where before we mapped the fields, we can see it's actually added those placeholders in. So instead of field year, month, it says field __0. And the same with color. So these zeros and ones, and these are sequential tokens, they relate to these up here. So what will happen is when we reuse the template, when we bind our fields or measures to the template we want to apply, they will get substituted in. So at the moment when, we don't have to review this, but it's here if we want to review it. At the moment, we have to copy that to the clipboard. So we can click the button here, or we can highlight the text and copy it. Now, recently, Microsoft have allowed us to download files from visuals, as long as the administrator, the tenant admin for Power BI lets us do it. So one of the features I'm working on for version 2 is a direct download if it's enabled. So we'll have a couple options here in the future, but for now, it's just copy to clipboard. And what we can then do is, we would just find a text editor. So I've got like Visual Studio Code, and I would just paste that in. And I would save it as a JSON file. So in true Here's One I prepared earlier fashion, here it is. So this is a version I got just before the demo, just to make sure that, in case anything untoward happened. I've got my template here. So I could now put that into source control, like Git or wherever I use. And then I've got a version of my visual there. So what I could then do is if I treat that as my master, if I then want to put this heat map somewhere else, in desktop, I could copy paste that visual into another page, but let's assume we've got a new workbook. I could add my Deneb visual to my canvas, and Deneb needs data to work. So what I would do is I would let's just put in let's put the average temperature in for now, just so that we've got some data, and then we can open the editor. And this is a brand new visual, so there's nothing here at the minute. So what we've got the option to do is create from an inbuilt template. So we package a few in for example purposes, just so you can get started, or we can do an import. So if we click the import button and we browse the template, and we click on the heat map template that we saved, this will now load in the template we created, and we've got a description in here that says what it is, and our preview image is there as well. So the report writer can see roughly what it should look like. And we've got our fields down here. So we've got our date and our measure, and these are those generic names we used. And what I can now do is I can assign my values from the pane. So what's kind of important is that with custom visuals, we only have the ability to access anything that's in this part of the user interface in Power BI. For security reasons, we can't talk to this, and we can't talk to this.
Okay.
This gets pushed in, so it seems redundant, but we have to do this inside the visual. So we've got average temperature, so I could click on, say, my date, and I don't have anything else, but I'll put that into my average temperature bucket, and then I can go to the date column, and I'll put my year month in, and then the drop down updates to show that that's available. So I can then click on that, and now my button becomes available, and I can click the create button, and then I've now got my heat map. So I can just go back to the main window, and I can just resize that. And at the minute, we don't have any city filters or anything, so it goes all the way back to 1928, I think. But wow. We could then just, we could then add a slicer in or start customizing it further. So this is sort of our way of being able to share work around, give you the ability to, because we don't have the ability to pick and choose visuals like this. Deneb is entirely flexible and open-ended. So this is how we're starting to help. And
I absolutely love this because just because you may work in an organization where you can copy and paste if you had the PBIX file, but maybe you don't have the PBIX file to copy and paste from it. This gives you the ability to just always go to a cold locker, always pull it in and go from there. I'm a huge fan. This is awesome.
Lovely, yeah, and like you said, like we said before, if you've got somebody else's template, you can use that as a starting point. So going back to what we said about custom visuals being very contextual, and somebody may develop a Deneb template that works for their use case, so it may not always work for yours, but at least you have somewhere you can start.
Yeah, I mean, this is just absolutely brilliant because of that, right? And that's how this is like the first time where I'm like, you know what, this is a great solution for an enterprise customer who's trying to have more visuals, who's trying to extend beyond the what do we have here, 25, 30 visuals tops that Power BI has, and you don't necessarily want to have what's in the custom visuals pane. This is just absolutely fabulous. And
That works.
now I see when you launch Power BI, you just had the Deneb already available for you inside there. How did you do that, if I may ask?
So with custom visuals, when you're signed in, you can actually pin a custom visual to the visualizations pane.
Yep.
So actually, in this case, this is loaded in the workbook. So I actually had this workbook ready to go. So in this case, we go to App Source and get more visuals. So hopefully most people know how to do that. So in this case, all I've done here is I've already loaded that visual. So I've gone to the App Source, store, and I've typed in Deneb or Vega, and I've browsed and I've installed it. But because I'm actually using a different account, I have a couple of work accounts. So under my consulting company account, it would appear in the pane all the time. But if you wanted that, you would right click and you would pin it to the visualizations pane. So what happens now is that's linked to my account up here, and it now becomes almost part of the the standard visual palette. And I cheekily noticed that Win last week had it there, which I thought was quite cool.
Yeah.
On his Power BI, which is awesome. But yeah, so now if I were to open a new workbook, then it would already be loaded for me. I don't have to go to App Source and load that in. But if I were to sign in or sign out of my account or sign in with a different one, if I didn't have that under my account, it wouldn't be there. But yeah, it's absolutely great. So if I were to just go File New, and it always opens on another monitor.
Because that's how presentations work, right?
Yeah, well, the good news is I've just got to turn my chair and then drag it across. But Teams does slow things down a little bit, huh? But if I now, we're not doing anything fancy.
Yeah.
But if I pull this across, I've got a pristine brand new document, but Deneb's there in the visualizations pane. I haven't had it to go and add it. So.
Yes, that is exactly right. So as an individual developer, you can have it there all the time. Now, you can also add this in as an organizational visual and enable it inside your organization. And for those on the live stream, and I'm just going to quick share my screen, share it so Dan, you can't see it. But
I'll stop mine though, because I think we're done with mine for now.
Okay, great. And we'll come back to you in just a second. You can actually go into the admin portal. You can, under organizational visuals, you can add in any visual that you want from the store. If you add it in from the store or a file, if you add it from the store, it'll always stay updated. And then if you make it enabled on the visualization pane, like I have right here, it will always show up in everyone inside your company's Power BI. Automatically, it's going to be there. And I think the Deneb custom visual is one that is 100% worth the time and energy to have up and running, and should be in everyone's Power BI report. So if you're a Power BI admin, that is one for you to enable today. So a little more of a plug for you there.
Thank you.
We'll get you in every single Power BI report that's out there. All right. All right, yeah, fantastic. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say I hope it'd be lovely to see. I think it's the key thing is it's part of the toolkit. It's not it's not the shotgun approach to everything, but certainly it can really help enrich your reports in the right places for sure.
Yeah. So, what is next for Deneb?
What is next?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I have. So 1.4 was the last big release that came out a couple months ago. I have a roadmap of features. I'm not quite ready to announce what they are yet.
Okay.
But I've been busy working on version 2. I talk about some of them. Some of the ones I know I can do.
Just
so,
hints.
I eat my own dog food, right? So I use Deneb most days, whether I'm developing with it or I'm actually developing for clients. So I get to use it a lot as well. I get a lot of feedback on it. A lot of the things I want to do have just been constrained by getting the tool out and making it work. So there's lots of things, people have brought up the fact that you can't add comments to JSON. So in code, you can usually put some what they call comments in, where you can actually just put some freehand notes, which is really great if you're coming back a few months later and you just need to get in your own head again, or
Right.
someone else is picking your work up. So that's actually really hard to do in web development because comments aren't part of JSON. So we've done some research, and on my machine, I have pretty good working concept where comments will work. So comments will be part, version 2 is probably what's next, to answer your question.
Okay.
Version 2 is a full rewrite.
Oh
So
my.
I have,
Okay.
that's why it's taking so long. Because there are things that, you build and you build and you build and you build. And each time I make a release, I try to optimize, but I've got to the point where there's things I want to do, and I just got to go back to basics. And there's performance things, and it performs pretty well, but it could be better. And so I'm taking all the things I learned and I'm just reinventing the wheel. So functionally, it's going to work the same. It'll look a little bit different, but that should be better for everybody. A lot of work's going to go into the editor. So unfortunately, we can't use for technical reasons, we can't use, like Visual Studio Code, brilliant editor. The Vega editor that's online, written by the team, uses that underlying editor. It's a great editor. It's got all the support for things that we might want, like comments and auto-completion and stuff like that.
Sure.
But it also doesn't work in custom visuals. So,
I've
tried it. A lot of my journey has been trying to make it work and getting distracted by it. And I've even talked to Microsoft internally about it, and it's just not possible.
Okay.
So a lot of the work is to strip back the editor that's in there because I used another library, and I'm learning how to customize that library. So a lot of what I'm doing is about how can I add comments, and they'll be in templates as well. How can I make more contextual help? How can I make the warnings and the errors more easy to spot? And how can I just help? Because JSON's an easy language, but it can be a bit fussy for some. So, can we have, the Vega language has some help. So if we tooltip over something, can we get the description? Can we make better autocomplete? Those are the kind of things I'm working on. And then there'll be some better integration with Power BI, which I will hopefully announce once I get beyond the feasibility things I'm doing currently. So at the minute, I'm just poking the bear a bit just to see what's going to stick. But it's looking very positive.
Oh,
but ultimately, productivity will be the biggest gains in version 2, I think, for people that live in there.
Okay. That is absolutely fantastic. And we are nearly reaching the end of our time together, so I am going to quick do a little plug. Next week, I have Charles Webb. He is going to be on. We're going to be talking Power BI data marts on and where they fit inside the enterprise. I'm very excited to have this conversation with Charles because there's going to be some pushback inside that conversation. It's going to be a heated, hot topic we're going to have, but it's going to be good. I'm really looking forward to have that conversation. So please, everyone, make sure that you have, if you haven't already, because I am a horrible YouTuber. I didn't say like, subscribe, leave a comment. I didn't do any of that stuff. So I should probably do that stuff, right? Like, make sure that you come back next week and, you hit that little like button and stuff. I really appreciate that. All right. So, Daniel, it has been wonderful having you on the live stream. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me. But more importantly, thank you so much for everything in creating Deneb. I and the community really appreciates it.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you for having me, and thank you for that, but also thank you for everything you do. A lot of what you do for the community is inspiring for all of us. So, thank you.
I just love it so much. It's so great.
It's addictive.
Yeah, it is. It is addictive. And clearly, everyone who's watching this at this point in time on the live stream. I thank you guys. Clearly love this stuff way more than is healthy or wise. We share the same sickness or affliction. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, joining us this week. I really appreciate you guys so much. It means a lot to me. And I'm very excited that we have this community that is so passionate about data and visualizing and connecting people with information. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys have a great week. Peace.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.